My name is Leslie Kane, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. Before we begin, please silence all phones and electronic devices. Additionally, please refrain from any interruptions to the debate, as it is being recorded for on-demand viewing and post-captioning services. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor for this evening's event. The Clean Elections Act is a campaign finance reform and public education measure initiated by Arizona citizens and passed by voters in 1998. The system provides clean funding for qualified participating candidates who agree to abide by the Clean Elections Act and rules. These include contribution and spending limits, foregoing special interest money, and participating in commission debates. We encourage audience questions, so please utilize the note card given to you when you entered the room and hold it up. Our volunteers will pick up the cards and deliver them to me. If you need additional cards, just raise your hand. If you have a question for a specific candidate, please include the candidate's name on the note card. It will be considered during the second half of the debate. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. The debate is scheduled for 1 to 1.5 hours, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. Tonight's debate includes 1-minute opening statements. The first half of the debate begins with 2 minutes to each candidate to answer the same question. After all candidates have responded to the question, the first responding candidate will be given an additional 30 seconds. We will rotate which candidate responds first. The second half will allow a different question per candidate with 1 minute to answer. And finally, we will have 1-minute closing statements. We ask that you remain polite to all of the candidates and give them a fair and uninterrupted hearing, no matter how strongly you may agree or disagree with anything being said. Tonight's participants are Ms. Tolanya Adams, Democratic candidate for State Representative, District Number 27, Mr. Reginald Boulding, Democratic candidate for State Representative, District Number 27, Mr. Diego Rodriguez, Democratic candidate for State Representative, District Number 27, and Mr. Roberto Sanchez Garcia, Democratic candidate for State Representative, District Number 27. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name, starting with the Senate for opening comments, and will progress from that starting point. Tonight, we have state representatives only. The order for the second half will be determined by reverse alphabetical order by last name, starting with the House. Ms. Adams, will you start the opening remarks, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Keene. I'd like to thank the audience and also the Clean Elections Commission as the only Arizona Clean Elections Commission candidate. I'm proud to be here today to discuss the issues. My name is Tolanya Adams. I am a Arizona native. I was born in Legislative District 27. My grandmother attended the Phoenix Union Colored School. She attended high school there and then subsequently bought her first house off of 24th Street, and we're in the district. I am a small business owner. I'm a first-generation graduate. I am a lawyer. I am a mother of 2 fantastic children, and I am running for the open seat vacated by a female Democratic lawmaker who is now seeking public office, and I'm honored to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boulding?
Good evening. My name is Reginald Boulding. I've had the pleasure of serving as your state representative for the last 4 years. To tell you a little bit about me, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and most importantly, I've been a champion fighting for our district. And that's what we need here in South Phoenix. We need a champion that's fighting for our working class families. We need a champion that's fighting for our kids. We need a champion that's fighting for our small business owners. We need a champion who's fighting for the everyday people for who far too long have been not getting the opportunities that they need. I'm proud to say that over the last 4 years serving in the state legislature, I've been able to be that champion for you fighting every single day, winning Legislator of the Year by the Social Workers Association and Champion of Education by our school administrators. But most importantly, when we think about those individuals and this Red for Ed movement that we knew that we have to pay for our teachers and make sure that our students have great classrooms, I've been a champion for our education system, and I want to continue to fight for you.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. And once again, I would also like to extend my thanks to the Clean Elections Commission for inviting us all here for this debate tonight. I'm the proud father of 2 great kids. I am a small business owner. I'm a successful attorney. I've been practicing here in Arizona since 1995. I began my career as a prosecutor, but now my practice is mainly focused on criminal defense. But I will tell you that my entire life has been dedicated to the service of justice. The last encounter I had with campaigns was in 2016 when I fought a hard-fought campaign against Bill Montgomery for the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Right now, what I'm focused on is making sure that we have a candidate here in LD 27 like Representative Bolding, one who believes in honesty, integrity, and public service. I'm looking forward to the challenges that face LD 27, and I'm excited to represent this district, and I too am running for the open seat. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez Garcia?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Roberto Sanchez Garcia. Sanchez is from my father's, and he's from Sonora, and Garcia is from my mother's, and she's from Sinaloa. I've been in Arizona for 29 years. Out of those 29, 17 of those it's been in South Phoenix. I've been a U.S. citizen for 26 years. And I have a background. I have a degree in business administration. I have a degree in Mexico also. I have a degree in healthcare. I have a background in healthcare. I also have a background in housing. I've been able to be part of a large foundations, nonprofit organizations. So I do understand what's happening, what it is. And the reason that I want to run is because there is a lot of division within the South Phoenix, and I want to bring unity. And we need to bring unity. I'm also a father. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I want to be able to, for her to feel proud.
Thank you. Thank you. At this time, we will begin the portion of the debate where each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the same question. The first question is for Mr. Bolding. If you were to be elected, what would be the first bill you would submit, and what would you consider your most important issue to address?
So I moved to Phoenix over a decade ago to become a teacher. I grew up in an underserved community myself. In fact, I grew up poor. My mother never had more than a high school education, but she wanted her sons to, myself and my 2 brothers. And I can tell you that through education, it's allowed me to sit here today. Currently have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and at 24 years old became a doctoral candidate in education policy. And elected in the State House of Representatives at 28 for my first term, and that's only because of education. So ensuring that our students have equal access and equity to classrooms and funding, that's absolutely going to be the first bill, in pushing to make sure that our state budget is about equity, not just about equality. We need to make sure kids in all communities, no matter what zip code that they're from, no matter what their obstacles are, that they have a shot, to pursue whatever their dreams are. And we have to make sure as legislators that we come to the state capitol every single day recognizing the privilege that we've been given. Because I can tell you, quite frankly, serving the last 4 years, many individuals who walk up and down that aisle, they've lost touch. They've lost touch with their community. They've lost touch precisely for the kids that they're supposed to be fighting for. And the only way that we create an Arizona that we want is if we stand up every single day and say that we have been given a privilege and we ensure that our kids have that same thing. I can tell you that over the last 4 years, I've been one of the most successful Democrats in the state legislature. And that's important because many times Democrats, they don't get bills passed. But I've been able to get legislation passed in every single term that I've been elected. And that's because I've had the ability to keep my eye focused on what matters most to our community and fight for it every single day. And if I'm lucky enough to be elected again, you can guarantee that that's the first thing that I'll do when I get back down to the State House.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you. That's a really excellent question. And what I would say is that I have a lot of ideas to improve LD 27 and by extension improve the state of Arizona, but it all comes down to our revenue structure. The first bill that I would introduce is an effort to rebalance our revenue structure to make sure that corporations and the wealthiest 1% of Arizona citizens finally begin to pay their fair share. Over the past 10 years, the Republican-controlled legislature and governor have ensured that tax cut after tax cut after tax cut have now undermined our ability to fund our future. Our schools are in crisis. Our infrastructure is falling apart. Our economic development is falling behind. So the first bill that I would look to do is to make those adjustments. Get rid of the sweetheart corporate deals that we have in terms of tax rebates, tax breaks, tax deductions that are geared towards special interests that are a result of lobbying by corporations. Because at the end of the day, the penny that you don't collect from a corporation is a penny that you're going to have to collect from a working family. And that is something that I think has been going on for far too long in the state of Arizona. There are many things we can improve. Many challenges we have to face, but the first one that we must deal with is to take a hard look, a clear-eyed look at our revenue structure and make sure that the burden is being shared equitably between corporations, working families, and individuals.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez Garcia?
Thank you. Well, it's funny because I'm just a candidate, I'm not the incumbent, but the way some of us learn the legislative system, the way it is, it's either you get elected, you go, you read about it. But the way I learned it was a little bit different. 15 years ago, my son died. And when he died, I was going through the mourning, through the grieving. And one of the things was that I went and I took, I was doing my taxes. When I was doing my taxes, they told me that I couldn't deduct most of the expenses that had occurred, because there was a law. Once he's dead, that fiscal year, you cannot do something. So I went to the legislation. I started to talk to individuals. I found out how do the bills work, sponsors. And I found a sponsor, and I started doing it. And I brought bipartisan to be able to bring a bill that now is called the Dominic Bill. And we passed that bipartisan bill to able to reassure that those individuals, not only are they hurting because they lost a loved one, but now they can actually go in that fiscal year, be able to deduct some of their expenses. It's not a lot. It wasn't retroactive. I didn't do it to benefit myself, but it was to benefit other families. And from that bill, we've been going, and now it's in 25 different states that has been helping. So I was able to do some of those things, and I understand sometimes we have to work bipartisan. But one of the things that I really want to do, my first bill would be introducing also is to start talking about the formula that schools use. There's two formulas that they're using right now, and one of the formulas is how do you fund public schools and how do you fund charter schools. We need to bring back down, and there is a law, and either we can take and remove. I'm all forward for public schools, but right now we do have the charter schools, so either we need to make it fair for both systems to be able to do. So that would be my first bill.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Growing up, I grew up in a household in in LD 27, which ended up being comprised of five children, 5 girls my mom had. And my parents got divorced fairly young in my childhood, leaving my mother, a single mom with no high school education, to raise 5 girls, one disabled, substantially disabled, wheelchair-bound, one-on-one care. And the course of my childhood, we had a lot of turbulency. We moved a lot, and in that transition, in a lot of those transitions, we moved schools, and a result of that was missing some of the fundamental education foundational building blocks. As a result, I am the first person in my family to graduate high school, and I'm very proud of that. I am the first person in my family to go to college on scholarship, even amongst my siblings. And as I sit here today, I'm a mother of 2 young adult men in their early 20s. And from the time I graduated undergraduate school in 2002 and graduated Sandra Day O'Connor Law School in 2006 and recently graduated the Thunderbird School of International Law in 2016. Those are the degrees that my family's entire generations hold. And I'm very proud of them. I understand the ability of education to advance and move families forward. I now do have nieces and nephews that are attending college, and I am highly interested in the advancement of education. The first bill that I would work with stakeholders in the community to pass would be restoration of education funding, funding that focuses on K through 12 education, funding that focuses on higher ed education, funding that really recognizes the importance of literacy and the impact that a quality education has on entire generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bolding, your 30-second response.
So in 2013, my mother passed. My mother had cancer, and we didn't find out that my mom had cancer until it was in stage 4. And the reason why is because she didn't have health insurance. Health insurance has become unaffordable for so many families in our communities. Like education, healthcare is a top issue, and we have to make sure that no family goes broke because they can't afford healthcare. Healthcare is a right, and that's something else I'll be fighting for every single day.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, how will you work with other candidates across the aisle legislatively?
The nature of what I do, my job, is looking at a problem that's either your client brings it to you and they're looking for a solution, or you're representing somebody who's made sometimes a very terrible mistake, and you're trying to find a solution. So the nature of what I do is built around relationships that I've been able to construct with my counterparts on either side of the case. Because when you're faced with a problem in the legal system, your goal is to do justice. And to do justice, then you have to learn how to sit down, look at things objectively, learn how to sit down with the opposing side, come to common ground, make accommodations where accommodations need to be made, but you still have to be true to your own principles. And again, so the principles that I stand for are honesty, integrity, and public service. So I would say to the folks on the other side of the aisle, as long as you believe in those same values, honesty, integrity, and public service, then I think we're going to be able to reach common ground, and I think we're going to be able to get things done. For far too long in the Arizona legislature, we've had ideologues on the other side who refuse to listen to reason, who refuse to listen to data, who make their decisions based on an ideology and not on what's best for the citizens of Arizona. So that's my plan once I reach the legislature, is to try to reconstruct those relationships of trust, those relationships that help further the best interests of the entire state of Arizona.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Sanchez Garcia?
Thank you. Well, how I tend to work with the other side, I really believe that somebody told me they said this, you need to first serve your community, and then you need to lead your community. So I'm going to lead my community in a way that I know how to do things. When the housing problem started in 2003, probably 2006, 2007, I used to own a business, a title company, and we used to have policies, people, and we knew that predatory lending was going on. So I founded an organization, and it's called Fix Your Loan, Save Your Home, with the Attorney General, with Valle del Sol. And I started to bring all these nonprofit organizations together to help those individuals that were put on, they were put on bad loans. So what I want to say is I'm able to talk, to reach out, and do not really take the credit for what it is. We also built, and my company we did the first bilingual policy in the history of the United States. In 187 years, there's never been a bilingual policy. We were the first company that did it. And it was just to help our Hispanic community, because there was translators, their kids, 9, 7 years old, are translating a legal document, and not even lawyers know what it says. And to have a 9-year-old telling their parent what are they signing, it was incredible. So we've been able to pass legislation and to benefit our community. So I know I'm able to reach out and get along. As long as it is for the benefit of my community, I'm willing to help.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Thank you. I would work. Can you repeat the question? I apologize.
No problem. The question is, how will you work with other candidates across the aisle legislatively?
Thank you. I would work with other candidates and elected officials across the aisle legislatively. I think both inside the House chamber and outside in the community. A lot of times when bills are passed, the stakeholder work and the development of that legislation has already traveled a long distance to find its way to committee. And as a former Senate policy advisor, I would begin doing that early stakeholder work. I mean, really bringing people to the table, people that have differing views and finding areas of agreement, whether that be the business community or leaders in the community, industry-related sector. I would use the Joint Legislative Budget Council. I would use the legislative staff attorneys that are there to draft the best policies. Sometimes, oftentimes, as Mr. Bolding stated, it is a challenge for Democrats to get bills passed and signed at the governor's desk. However, there is a lot of other interesting work and ways to advocate and defeat bad legislation, both through amendments or brokering deals behind the scenes to really defeat bad legislation from ever getting to the floor. And I would employ many different strategies working across the aisle to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bolding?
So this is a great question. I can tell you that I've worked across the aisle during my time at the legislature. Quite frankly, Republicans have held the state house for over 5 decades, and the only way I've been able to get bills passed is by working both sides of the aisle. One major issue that we have in this city is homelessness. And I can tell you that for many of our individuals in our community who are homeless, many of them don't have identification. And if you don't have identification, you can't get a job. It's hard for you to enroll your children into school. It's hard for you to get basic services. And IDs cost anywhere from $12 to $25. But if you're homeless, that $12 to $25 is a sandwich. That $12 to $25 is a safe place to sleep. Arizona has 500,000 veterans throughout this state, and and a lot of our veterans are homeless. Working across the aisle, I was able to get a bill passed this year that provides free IDs to all homeless veterans in the state of Arizona. And the only way I can do that is get it passed in the House, that's Republican-led, and in the Senate, that's Republican-led, and signed by our Republican governor. But one thing I can tell you is I'm going to never sacrifice my values for the sake of getting things done. I'm not going to compromise and try to work across the aisle when it comes to our children's health. I'm not going to compromise and try to work across the aisle when it comes to making sure to sell out our working families. And I can tell you that I'm not going to compromise to make health care affordable to our seniors. The fact of the matter is, for far too long, Democrats have compromised so much that we got stuck with the half-baked health care system in this country, that we've compromised for so long that we got kids at the border who are being separated from their parents. For far too long, we've compromised on our basic values, and we have to stand up for what we believe in.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, your 30-second response.
Thank you. At the end of the day, what it comes down to is building trust relationships with those who are also responsible for representing the citizens of Arizona. A good way to do that is to start off with a bill that everybody should agree on. A bill that everybody should agree on is automatic voter registration when you get your driver's license. That should happen automatically. When you get your driver's license, you should be automatically registered as a voter. That is something that preserves our democracy, it preserves the franchise, and it makes sure that everybody gets a voice.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez Garcia, if elected, what steps would you take to continue diversifying Arizona's economy, and what industries or sectors would you focus on?
Perfect, thank you. Well, first of all, we need to identify the new revenue streams that we're going to have. And by that, we need to implement infrastructure. We're going to need education. We're going to need health care. And we need to figure out how we can work with our chambers of commerce to be able to have a well-educated workforce to attract better lines of streaming for it to work for the state. Right now, we promote, we have schools, but unfortunately, where Arizona has become our number one employer that we have, it's Banner. So instead of becoming ourselves a state of like California of technology, we became a state of health services. So we need to take advantage of that. Now that we have that, we need to go and recruit top doctors. We need to recruit those individuals to come here to the state of Arizona, one. And second of all, find out what it is. Bring that health care, what Reginald is saying. We need to provide an affordable health care to our children, but also we need to educate our children, and we need to educate our families. We need to educate our population of it's not just paying less, it's having a healthy lifestyle. I work in the healthcare industry. I've been there for 8 years, 9 years, and we need to now educate those individuals of how you can have a better lifestyle and have a better life. So those are one of the streams that I would go after to bring a better economy.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
If elected, the steps I would take to continue to diversify the economy would really be focused on innovation and entrepreneurship. As a small business owner myself, and even my mother, having been raised without a high school diploma, she did go back and obtain her high school diploma and started a business in 2003 when I was starting law school. And it's a home health care business that serves the elderly and disabled community, like my sister. It is a business that she is very passionate about, and entrepreneurship has really changed the economic dynamics for my family. I think both creating an educated workforce to help compel economic development and bring flagship entities here to headquarters here in Arizona is really important. I think a focus on healthcare industries is appropriate, as well as tourism. I would work with the city and the county and the chambers to look at some things that are moving forward, especially in Legislative District 27, equitable transit-oriented development that helps hire and retain local labor for those new big multi-billion construction projects. But I would really focus on cultivating economic development as it relates to innovation, healthcare, and entrepreneurship.
Thank you. And I'd like to take a moment to encourage the audience once again to please submit questions. Please do. Mr. Bolding?
Thank you. I have a 23-month-old daughter, and I hear once you get to 24, you just start saying two. So I have a 23-month-old daughter, and her name is Faith. And it is amazing that she already knows how to work my cell phone. She knows how to hop on the laptop and knows how to turn it on. As a teacher, there was not one student in my classroom that was not much better with technology than I was. We know that technology has the ability to transform not only our community, our state, and our country. We have to make sure that we are looking at technology in a number of different fields to make sure that, one, that our kids are prepared, but also our families who are currently in other industries. We have to use our community colleges and bring people who may be in industries that are dying and allow them to gain the skills that our kids have. Because quite frankly, before my mother passed, she didn't know how to work the computer. And if you can't apply for jobs today without going on a laptop, without going online, technology has to be at the forefront, and we have to make sure that we're really pushing that. And I'm glad to be endorsed and have been endorsed by the Arizona Technology Council and many others. The other aspect is entrepreneurship. We have to not only talk about entrepreneurship, but we have to make sure that our entrepreneurs have access to capital. Because if they don't have access to capital, then that's a problem. And it's an injustice today that our kids could get a $100,000 student loan, but a bank won't give them $100,000 to actually start a business. And what I will continue to do, and I currently serve as the vice president of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, in taking on an initiative for access to capital for our communities.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you. Just leading into this question, I just want to reemphasize, this all comes down to two things. We need to fix our revenue structure. We need to make sure our education system is adequately funded, because that's where all of this starts. I also agree that we need to take a hard look at what we're doing with our standard of living, because quite frankly, that's what technology companies look for. They want a high standard of living. They want an infrastructure. They want good schools for their kids. And so what are we talking about? For example, there are 7,000 open cybersecurity positions open right now in the state of Arizona. Those aren't being filled because we don't have the people who are trained to take care of those jobs. For every one of those jobs that gets filled, then that's millions of dollars that go into our economy that can be used to share resources, that can be used to grow new businesses. So looking forward, what we need to do is make sure that we have the resources to build a strong and vibrant 21st century economy, one that focuses on innovation and technology, but one that also prepares Arizona and our kids to take on the new challenges in the 21st century, to build the next industry. And I don't know what that's going to be, but I can tell you right now that we're not in the position to lead that next step, and that's what we need to do. So in the short term, we should be looking at technology. We should be looking at how to diversify our economy along the lines of entrepreneurship, but we got to take care of the basics. It all comes down to education and infrastructure.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez Garcia?
Well, there isn't a silver bullet of how we're going to be bringing this. But one of the things we really need to do also is focus and maybe raise the taxes on the fuel. We haven't done that since the 1990s. And then we have to eliminate the sweeps. we've been giving, the legislator gives to anybody for their own leisure, whatever business, to special interests. So we need to exercise physical restraint and just be able to say what's good for them.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, do you believe that Arizona is perceived as an anti-immigrant state? Why or why not? And how might this affect the state's ability to attract new businesses and/or tourism?
That's a great question. I'm not sure that I have a position either way. I think the perception is actually mixed. Being an Arizona native, I think Arizona's image has waned and waxed as it relates to immigration, in part due to initiatives and pro anti-immigration laws that have sent messages both domestically here in the state, nationally in the U.S. and internationally to our neighbors in Mexico and in South America. I think in part Arizona is perceived as anti-immigrant. Primarily because we spend a lot of time with state leaders that focus on the enforcement side of immigration, but really have done little to create a sustainable or equitable path. But I also think Arizona is perceived as a place comprised of great citizens that are really focused on creating and cultivating a beautiful American city and environment, right? And we see that in part with the removal of Russell Pierce, right? The state senator. We see that with the not re-election of Joe Arpaio. We see that with citizens that live here on the ground, exercising their democratic skills to advance an entirely different narrative. And I am very encouraged. I am a Flynn Brown Fellow of Civic Leadership. We do a lot of work with Laddie Corr's organization, the Arizona We Want, and you see that delta between policy and the populace. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bolding.
So the question is, do I believe Arizona is perceived as an anti-immigrant state? My short answer is yes, absolutely. When you see policies at the state legislature that specifically target people just because of who they are, I don't think it's a perception. I think it's reality. The fact of the matter is, what we've all seen what's been happening these last few days, taking infants from their mothers and having a governor who has used the Arizona National Guard to go down to the border to participate in this. That's not okay. We have to be a welcoming country, a country that allows people to really know what unity is all about. I can tell you in the state legislature, I've been able to use my position to help our families to know that Arizona should be welcoming. We know that a lot of our kids who may have been brought here without immigration status are DACA students. It's been universally accepted that these kids they absolutely contribute to our state. They absolutely contribute to our communities, and we know that there was sort of an expiration in the president. He signed the order that would have got all of our DACA kids. Their expiration expired, so we had a short period in which they could actually get their renewals. And I didn't publicize this, but I am going to say it now. What I did is I created a partnership with the company Lyft. And with our DACA families, and every single family in the state of Arizona who needed transportation to get their papers renewed. I got it paid for by Lyft for free. That's to show that our families, that there is support, and there are companies and there are people that are fighting for them, and that's what I want to continue to do.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez.
My short answer is also yes, but I come at it from a slightly different point of view. When I'm dressed like I am now, and before people hear me speak, they make certain assumptions. When I go to certain parts of this state, when I go to certain parts of this county, they make certain assumptions based on what I look like, based on perhaps the car I'm driving. But I'll tell you what, sometimes I don't wear a suit. Sometimes I wear a T-shirt. Sometimes I wear a baseball cap. Sometimes I wear jeans. And sometimes I'm dirty because I'm outside in the yard doing things. Those reactions are different. Those assumptions are different. In my job as a criminal defense attorney, I can tell you I've seen the unfortunate result of racial bias, of racial prejudice. I ran against Bill Montgomery because I resented what he was doing to support Sheriff Arpaio and his unconstitutional attacks on justice and law enforcement in our community. So clearly, I think Arizona has a problem, but it doesn't mean we can't fix it. It's just going to take people of good conscience, people like Representative Bolding, people like most of the people in this room who understand that we're not going to move forward into this next century holding on to the hatred and the bias of the last century. So when I'm in the state legislature, I'm going to do what I can to help educate the ignorant, to help the fearful understand that we're all in this together, and to finally, once and for all, show the face of the future of the United States and the face of the state of Arizona to people who right now are making policies based out of fear and ignorance. Because those are the challenges we need to face and we need to defeat. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez Garcia.
Thank you. Well, absolutely. I definitely believe that this state is, and it's not a new thing. It's been for a long time. I had the opportunity to run an organization called Border Governors, and it was the 6 governors of Mexico with the 4 governors of the United States in the border. And what we were trying to do is create a mega region where it was a different view of what the border is. And in 1997, Governor Wilson tried to submit this proposition 197 for it was the immigration. And all the Latino community in California got together and they were not able to pass it. And it's the same proposition that passed SB 1070. It's the same author, and it was the same exact law that they passed here. Now, one of the things that is happening is that we have a legislation that is having all this anti-immigration, but at the same time, we have a governor and a staff that they're building relationships in Mexico with Governor of Sonora, Claudia Pavlovich, and they come and they show a picture that they're like united, that they're great, that nothing is going on. And at the same time, we have I'm afraid. I moved to South Phoenix because Michael Johnson made me move. He said, this is the best place, you should come. And, and I was like, okay, I will, I'm going to build a university. And he built South Mountain there. And, and he was always talking and he did great things. But there was a lot of diversity. Now, I'm afraid of my daughter, of what's going on. She is Hispanic, and she's the only one that knows that I don't have an accent. She told me, do you have an accent, Dad? And I was like, how can you not know that? But, not for her. But anyway, we need to stop those things. And I'm going to be tomorrow going to Tucson because they have a concentration camp right there in Oracle, and we're going to be protesting. We do have a very, very racist state.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, your 30-second rebuttal.
I think the second half of your question was what impact is that having on businesses? I think it has had an impact. SB 1070, we certainly saw an impact on business. We saw a reverse with the Brewer administration. But I also think that there are Chamber of Commerce that really are pushing for service industry. There's agribusiness. There's the ACLU, right? There are organizations, nonprofits on the ground advocating for a more equitable and fair and pro-immigration, and we need to honor and respect that progress too.
Thank you. Mr. Bolding, what makes you the best candidate, and why should the voters choose you?
So I didn't get into politics to tear anybody down. I got into politics to lift everybody up. And I can tell you that over the last 4 years, that's what I've tried to do. As a teacher in our community, fighting for our kids, as a legislator, fighting for our community. I believe that I'm uniquely positioned to continue to fight for our community because I bring a certain level of experience. I believe credibility, and people have seen me do the work. There's very few rooms that I walk into where I haven't met someone, or someone haven't heard of me, or someone haven't had a conversation with me because I've been doing the work, and I don't take this for granted. It's a privilege as a kid who grew up poor to now making laws in the state of Arizona. It's a privilege. And I believe not only does my education background make me an extremely qualified candidate, I believe my outreach. It doesn't matter if you are African American, Latino, white, old, young, rich or poor. We can have a conversation. We can relate to each other. And we can use that conversation and that relation to each other to get things done. And I truly believe that's what makes me unique. I'm approachable. I've showed that I've continued to fight, and I'm a fighter. One of the most important things is if I've had the support of my colleagues at the state legislature. Coming up this session, there's going to be a lot of great things that we can do. And it's happened because of the support that I've got from my colleagues and the support that I've got from my community. And I believe that's what makes me uniquely qualified to serve again in this seat.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
I've thought about this question a lot. And what comes to my mind is one of the earliest memories that I have as a young child was I grew up in a trailer court in Casper, Wyoming, and I remember as a young kid getting a knock at the door, and I'm going to date myself here because I'm old enough to remember milkmen who actually brought you milk in bottles. So that knock on the door came, and he wanted to drop off the milk, but he also wanted to collect the bill for that month. And so I went into my mother's room, and what she handed me was what I didn't know then, but what I do know now was food stamps. And she told me to go pay the milkman with the food stamps. And so ever since then, as I grew up and I learned that the challenges that you face are many times, they're conquered when you decide that you're not going to take it anymore. And so what I learned that through education, hard work, and applying myself, that I could get myself out of where I was, that I wasn't destined to stay where I started. And so now, as I came through, I'm an attorney now. I went to college at the University of Notre Dame, law school at the University of Arizona. I mean, I've done a lot, but I know I didn't do it alone. I know that it took the support of many government programs, more than one government program in the safety net to help me get to where I got to. I know that it took the support of a community and many people who wanted to see me succeed. So when I think about why I'm the best person, I've been there. I know it can be done. I want to turn around. I want to help the next person in line. And that's why I'm here to fight for working families in LD 27, fight for education, fight for access to affordable health care, fight for access to good jobs that pay a livable wage. And that's why I want to represent LD 27.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez Garcia?
Well, Helen Keller once says, what could be worse than to be blind? And it's to have sight and don't have a vision. And to have a vision, it requires leadership. And I believe I have a strong leadership. I feel a kinship with my district. I want to go back to that promise that 17 years ago when I moved to South Phoenix was that diversity. I've been able to prepare myself. Now, unique, I'm not. I thought I was unique 15 years ago, and when my son died, what I learned was that everything that I was supposed to teach him, he taught me. He taught me how to have compassion. He taught me how to understand. He taught me how to listen. And I've been able to do those things that before I didn't. So now I know I'm not unique. Before I thought I was unique, though, but nowadays I don't. But I go back, I do have that strong leadership. Being part of different boards, it prepared me from NCADD, the National Council of Alcohol Dependency. I was part of the national board, and we needed to take away that stigmatism that alcohol was a drug, that drugs were this. We needed to teach people that it was a disease. From being in Fix Your Loan, Save Your Home, we needed to teach people on the housing projects. We needed to do all those things. So I've been prepared for the last 25 years to serve my community. Now is the opportunity for me to do it. So I will do it with pride. I will continue. I will work effortless because I want my daughter to be raised in South Phoenix. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Thank you. I believe I'm the best candidate because I am homegrown from this district. I am a product of public school. I have been a single mother. I bring a fresh perspective. I bring a mother's perspective. And as the composition of our district is changing, I also believe the composition of our legislature is changing, right? Technology, one of the great things about technology is that it has really like flattened this leadership concept, this precept that we are really led by the number of elected officials in the community. And that's what I'd like to see is more collaborative, horizontal, disruptive leadership. We see that happening all over the nation. Individuals running for office that don't have legacy last names, that have never been elected before, that have developed themselves and raised their hand and said, let's give these voters a choice. And that's why I've decided to run, because I'm passionate about this work. I've done this work in the community. I've written grants. I've drafted policy at the legislature as a Senate policy advisor. I've worked with the arts community and created an Eastlake Arts in the Eastlake area. I'm working on a documentary there right now. I come from a very challenged and disadvantaged background. I know the pain points, I know the barriers, and I can bring that perspective to the legislature to draft meaningful legislation. As it relates to role models, I think we need more role models in the community. I think people need to be out in the community and not down at the legislature part of the political class. They need to be working with coalitions and building stakeholder meetings. I will do that. I will spend my time out in the streets where I was raised, where my family is from. Networks make a difference. I am part of the Valley Leadership class of 32. I have many relationships with community leaders, both faith-based and otherwise, the arts community, the Flynn Brown Civic Leadership Fellowship. We are all doing incredible work as it relates to public policy. I intend to continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Boulding, your 30-second rebuttal.
So one of the great things is that not only us telling you what we can do, but also people believing in you. And I'm so glad to have the support of so many people who believed in me, from the Arizona Nurses Association, the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, the UFCW, Fire, Social Workers, Planned Parenthood, Arizona Building Trades and Construction. These are all organizations who've stood behind me and said that you've been fighting and we want to continue to fight with you. And that third-party validation is something that's amazing, because it's something that you don't seek, but it's something that people seek for you and tell you that we believe in you and you are our champion.
Thank you. And at this time, we will transition to the second part of the debate, where each candidate will receive a separate question with 1 minute to respond. Remember, you may still submit questions via note cards and direct them to specific candidates. The first question is for Mr. Sanchez Garcia. Mr. Sanchez Garcia, you mentioned that South Phoenix is divided. What is the main division?
Yes. We have a lot of division in South Phoenix. We haven't been able to grow in South Phoenix. If in 17 years that I've been there, right now, the best business that is growing, it's a Wendy's right there on 24th Street and Baseline. And the second best was on 51st Avenue and Baseline. It was a Kentucky Fried Chicken. We need to have more diversity. We need to bring. And why is it divided? Because the leadership, not only in our community, but also in the mayor's community, like the city. Phoenix is redlined. South Phoenix is redlined, and we do not have, no business can go over there. So we need, and why is it redlined and it's divided? Because they want to get their way, and they're not really looking at our community. They want to get rid of our community and for their own purposes. So we really need to, everybody's moving. They're moving us from South Phoenix, and they're growing, and it's going to continue to be at redlined if we do not unite and do something about it.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, what changes would you recommend to ensure safety in schools and other public places?
First of all, we need to quickly implement common sense gun control reform. For example, we need to raise the minimum age of purchase. That should be 21. We need to pass red flag laws to make sure that when someone becomes a danger to themselves and to others, that law enforcement has the ability to restrict their access to firearms. That is easily done. We need to ban bump stocks. There's no reason why you should be able to convert a weapon that's not fully automatic to one that, for all intents and purposes, is fully automatic. And finally, we just need to sit down and take a good hard look at whether or not we're making it too easy for somebody to buy an assault weapon. They should be taxed. People should have to go through rigorous training to own them, because they're very serious and very deadly weapons, and it may not be realistic to remove them, but we can definitely make the burden heavier.
Thank you. Mr. Bolding, expand more on the border issues as to a resolution of the separation of parents and children.
So the separation of parents and children is actually one of the largest issues in South Phoenix. And let me explain. Not only have we seen children separated from parents at the border, we've seen children separated from parents by our Department of Child Safety. And I can tell you one of the most calls that I get is from our kids being taken away from their parents, because you have a child safety system in many cases that have inexperienced individuals who may be working there, or you have the policies that don't allow people to actually set up a system that's fair for our community. So our children are being taken here in South Phoenix. Our children are being taken from the border, and that's something that we have to stand up and say, what are our values? Because quite frankly, as a father, I can't imagine you taking my daughter and I can't imagine that. And that has become policy in this country and in this state under our governor.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, can you please give an example of an opportunity for innovation in economic development within District 27?
Sure, thank you. So currently, if I'm want to make sure I get my bearings right in the district, if you Well, I'll start with the Phoenix Union Colored School, where my grandmother attended, right off of 4th Street in Grant. It is now known as the George Washington Carver Museum. It still stands there today, and it is the most southern part of what former Mayor Greg Stanton has identified as the Innovation District. So it is right next to Galvanize, Webb PT, and then it goes further into, further north towards Washington Street. In that innovative layer, in that innovative area, you see a lot of tech, work sharing, entrepreneurship, just creative modeling going on. That is in our district. That's our district. That's something to celebrate and to expand on. And I think that would be a great place to begin.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez Garcia, do you agree with the Red for Ed protest? And do you think teachers made the right decision to hold a strike? And what feedback have you heard from voters about the strike?
Absolutely. I definitely agree with the protest. I mean, I'm not just only a member of, I come from a background of unions. I was a union member here for CenturyLink for 6 years. So the movement that they did, it was something to better themselves, and I absolutely believe. Now, this movement has to continue. It was a product of them organizing and saying enough is enough. Because the legislation and the governor and everybody there were not really listening to them. They only gave them a 1% last year. They wanted to give them a different percent. But now that that money got allocated for them, they have to take that movement down to the schools because it's going to be the administrators, the one. Every district has different salaries. I can just talk for what's going to happen in South Phoenix. South Phoenix got a raise for $45,000 starting rate now for the teachers and a 7.5% for all the administration except for other individuals there. But I definitely do think it was a great thing that they did.
Thank you. And Mr. Rodriguez, the labor unions have been very vocal this year. Did that surprise you? And what is your opinion on labor unions?
I am a strong supporter of labor unions. I have never been a member of a labor union as an adult, but that doesn't mean I haven't benefited from them. Labor unions have traditionally been the driver of the middle class in the United States, and you can draw a direct line between the undermining of the labor union in the United States and the decline of the middle class in the United States and the attacks on working families in the United States. Those all relate back to the attacks that have been made against unions in this country. So I'm a strong union supporter. I was not surprised. I was very happy to see it. Arizona does not have a long history of union activism, but I think that's changing, and I think that's for the good. I think that's for everyone's betterment. To the extent we're united and we are moving all in the same direction, which is forward, which is towards a more just and equitable society, and if unions are at the front, that's all the better, because they understand what it's like to get up in the morning and work for a living and try to build a future for your family.
Thank you. Mr. Bolding, what are your plans or hopes for improving access to mental health services for all Arizona citizens, especially in light of the current crisis in the country? And what can Arizona do within the current healthcare structure?
So that's a great question. Right now in this country, mental health has a stigma. Many people don't talk about mental health issues for a number of reasons. And I even think about in my family, you know, we've had individuals who may have been mentally ill, and you just say, well, Michael, he's just, that's just how Michael is. It's like, no, that's not how Michael is. Michael needs help. He needs support. So the first is providing awareness. And specifically when I think about this district, we have to have providers that are relatable to the people who are in this district. And by that, what I mean is that it's not okay to have providers who aren't culturally sensitive to the communities that they serve. If you're a provider, you should have some type of history or background. Specifically with that client that you're serving. The first piece is awareness. We have to make sure that we have awareness, and once we move from awareness, then we actually start moving to treatment.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, is Arizona capitalizing on solar energy to its best ability? Why or why not?
I don't believe Arizona is capitalizing on solar energy to its best ability. As a sunshine state and part of the Sun Belt, there certainly are initiatives that are advancing forward both this political cycle and in the private sector to increase Arizona's solar energy position, I think, as far as our energy portfolio. But I really believe Arizona should lead as a sunshine state as it relates to solar, both in residential and in commercial, and even as it relates to selling solar energy on the exchange.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez Garcia, what is your position on the state's decision to expand the Medicaid program?
I believe that we should continue to expand is the Medicaid program, you said? The question was for Medicaid, right?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I definitely believe we continue to expand the Medicaid, but not only we should expand it, but we need to start educating and finding out that it's not just about continuing us expanding programs, but we need to find out and we need to go back to our labor force. We need to increase their wages for them to make a better living. So eventually, we will be able to, for them to, there's two parts. We need to bring down to make it more affordable to every individual to receive health care benefits, and then also we need to expand it. But we need to provide a better living wages for them, so eventually once they get out of that, they will continue to afford that health care system for them. And it's about education. We need to prevent, and we need to continue to be preventing, because if we do prevention, it will cost the state less money.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, what is your position on an income tax increase on wealthier Arizonans to boost K through 12 funding? And do you agree with this approach? If you believe the state needs a dedicated funding source to increase public school funding, what would you recommend?
I fully support the Invest in Education initiative and I truly do hope it makes it on the ballot. I think Arizona citizens should be given the opportunity to decide once and for all, and to say once and for all, that we need a dedicated and reliable source of funding for education. Failing that, if it is not passed by the voters through an initiative, then I would advocate in the state legislature for what I mentioned earlier, which is rebalancing our revenue structure here in Arizona. There are literally hundreds of millions of dollars that are being lost every year through special interest tax breaks that are given to corporations. We also need to make sure that we rebalance the property taxes between businesses and between individuals, because once again, if you're wondering why your assessment on your home is going up, it's because the taxes on corporations are going down. That's just how it is. Somebody's got to pay the bill. So I would look towards reforming our current revenue structure, absent the Invest in Ed initiative failing to pass.
Thank you. Mr. Bolding, the Arizona Supreme Court denied in-state tuition for DACA. What have you heard from voters? Do you agree with the court's decision? Why or why not?
So I began my comments talking about the need for education and how education changed my life and how education has changed the lives of so many people who live in South Phoenix. And what we know by the court ruling, and it's going to prevent a number of students from having the ability to access education. As a state, why would we ever want to make it more difficult for people to access education? And by not allowing our DACA students to have in-state tuition, when in many cases, this Arizona is the only thing that many of our DACA students have known. And as a teacher, I had students who were brought here when they were 2 years old, so they don't know any other country but the United States. But to tell them that they shouldn't have access, I think that's a mistake. And I think that we have to ask ourselves, what are our values? And what the community have said has been just that we believe our students have access to education, higher education as well.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, do you think recreational marijuana should be legalized?
That's a great question. I think, sorry, I'm responding to someone in the audience. I think it's a curious question. I don't have an answer. Is my response. I did my undergraduate at the University of Washington. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Arizona and Washington State. I sat on a public policy board comprised primarily of Supreme Court retired judges and other legal experts as Washington was drafting legislation and trying to identify ways to market and introduce and respond to its past initiative for recreational marijuana. And there were a lot of anticipated and unanticipated outcomes. Washington State now has recreational marijuana, and as does Colorado, and I think it is coming online in Mexico and elsewhere. I think it needs to be under study.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Sanchez Garcia, this was the first year that with the increased minimum wage in Arizona, do you think it has put small businesses at a disadvantage? Why or why not?
Yes and no. It has put small business and disadvantages in the rural communities, absolutely. Because the cost of living in the rural communities is less than the cost of living in Phoenix. So when we have an increase of minimum wage to somewhere in Rio Rico and Tubac, and they're making, for us to be paying those individuals, so we have to, I believe we have to balance it to according to our means. Now, here in Arizona, I think it's been a great thing. I think here, I'm not in Arizona, I'm sorry, here in Phoenix, I think it's been a great thing because these individuals are trying to, they're not offering us, by working in those restaurants, by working in these industries, they're not being offered health care. They're not being offered college tuitions for them to pay. So they'd be able to do that. So I think it's great here, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, what improvements would you make to make the healthcare program more cost efficient?
Well, that's something that I actually have a lot of practical experience with. On occasion, I handle personal injury cases, and I have represented people who obtain benefits from Access. Access is very, very good about keeping their eye on billing. They're very good about recouping recoveries from people who have been injured and have then gone on to recover from the people responsible for their injury. So there can be a lot of reform done from internally. We just need to keep an eye on costs. Unfortunately, much of this is going to be out of our control because of what's happened in the federal level with the treatment of the Affordable Care Act. But on a local level, the more we can do to try to keep costs down, the more the state can do to try to encourage savings within the system, cut down on waste, and then also try to subsidize in some way healthcare premiums, which are going to skyrocket in October, once again, due to the sabotage of the Affordable Care Act. These are all things we can do to try to keep healthcare more affordable. It's a big challenge, and it is coming, but we can address it.
Thank you. Mr. Bolding, do you believe the state should invest additional resources into rehabilitating those in the criminal justice system?
Yes, I believe the state absolutely should spend our dollars looking at rehabilitation. But even before that, I think there's a step before that. We have to make sure that we have a criminal justice system in this country that actually works for our people. Right now, we have we see mass incarceration at significant levels, and that's something that's an issue here in this country. We have to make sure that we are providing laws that are just. We have too many low-level, non-violent offenders that are in our prison system. It's the fact of the matter that we spend over $20,000 a year incarcerating, but less than $5,000 educating our kids is an injustice. And what we have to do is make sure that we are using those dollars to invest in our kids and not in our correction system.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, what recommendations do you have for improving public school safety?
Thank you. I think the recommendations that I have for improving public school safety is really strengthening families. I think when we talk about the conditions of humans and the conditions of children, the conditions of classroom, I think that's a big part of it. Strengthening families, strengthening communities, strengthening neighborhoods. As I've been knocking doors, one of the things that's come up regarding education is a lot of conversation about, when I was in school, if there was an issue, you just went across the street because all the kids attended the same school. And as we look at the systematic defunding of public education, all resources, including resources that reinforce safe environments, safe learning environments, and quality, exceptional education for all of our children, especially in Legislative District 27, is to begin to restore funding to public schools, adequate funding to public schools, reducing class sizes, strengthening families, and supporting parents.
Thank you. And at this time, we'll have our closing remarks, and the first closing statement will be given by Mr. Sanchez Garcia.
Perfect, thank you. Well, right now, one of the things that we're working is we're building a college for the DACA kids. And next month, we're going to have it running, and it's going to be for all those DACA kids that were able to, because they removed the in-state tuition, we built a college for them to be able. It's just going to be a junior college, but we're going to be doing it. So those are projects that we continue to have to work and doing so. One of the things that I want to also continue to work is in building and being able to see our infrastructure, what we have in South Phoenix. And we're building so many in Thunderbird Golf Course, it's at 7 and Dobbins. We got 500 homes. We have over here on 35th and Baseline, 300 homes. 24th Street and Southern, 200 homes that they're building. We do not have infrastructure for 3,000 new cars. We need to do something about it. We need the city to start working with us so we can bring better infrastructure.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you. My goal for tonight has been to make it very clear to the voters of LD 27 that I will be that progressive Democrat who stands up and fights for working families. I share the values and the goals that Representative Bolding has talked about. I will be that candidate, that legislator who fights for education, who fights for our children, who fights for our community's future, and by extension, who fights for the future of the state of Arizona. The values that I will take to the legislature: honesty, integrity, and a commitment to public service. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is about. I truly believe that if you are looking to represent your constituents because of something in it for you, then you're not in it for the right reason. You should be in it because you want to build a better community. I am in it because I want to build a better community. I'm in this race because I want to make sure that we live in the community that we deserve, that we live in the best LD 27 that we can build together.
Thank you. Mr. Bolding.
So I want to be real with you for a second here. These are challenging times. We have families who are living paycheck to paycheck, no matter if they're making $20,000 a year or $100,000 a year. We have kids who are in schools where their desks are shaking, where there are leaks in the roof. We have our seniors who don't know how they're going to pay for their medicine. The fact, and even more so, we have a government that doesn't seem like it's working. The only way that we move forward is by taking the strength that we have of our community. And the South Phoenix, Laveen, Guadalupe, Tempe, downtown Phoenix community is strong because it's diverse and it brings a wealth of experience. And I think my experience will help us continue to fight in our state legislature. Thank you for your support in the past, and I'd love to have your support in the future. Ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Thank you. I am running to represent this district because it's my home district. It's exactly where I'm from. I'm running because I think role models matter. And in my life, I have seen strong women do incredible things. I have a mom that is an ordained minister and deeply committed individual to my sister who has special needs, and to each of her children. And it's those values that shaped me. I have a heart of service. I have a desire to serve. I am passionate about the work. I'm doing the work. I care about children and increasing the opportunities that are available to our district. I am ready to serve. I am equipped to serve. I bring forth with me the passion and the desire not just to fight, but to write letters, to sit at the table, to compromise, to achieve desired outcomes, to change the dynamics in our district, to allow the people an enhanced quality of life that doesn't exist presently. And I ask for your vote. I'm Talanya Adams.
Thank you. And to all of our candidates, we thank you so much for participating in our forum. And to our audience members, we thank all of you who took time to come and inform yourselves before voting. We encourage you to visit www.azcleanelections.gov/voter-dashboard for a customized experience to find information on the primary election, the candidates, the issues, and to view this debate on demand. Please fill out the debate evaluation form and return it to one of our volunteers. Your feedback is important to the commission and will help improve future debates. I would also like to mention that we have voter registration forms on the materials table just right outside the door. Thank you all for coming tonight, and you're welcome to stay and speak directly to the candidates. Have a great evening.